Okay. Is there anyone else having trouble on the website being able to view it online?
With which website?
The one they sent in that letter where we could view it online. I go into it, that says network connection not found.
I didn't notice any issues. Let me take a look.
Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not seeing any issues on my end with the link.
It may be me, but I'll go ahead and listen over the phone here.
Oh, I also had trouble getting in on the link on the computer, but I'm listening on the phone too. So there's two of us anyway that have had trouble.
This is John Beal with the city of Tucson. I was looking at the some of the options, and one says merge to video. I could try hitting that and see what that does.
That would be nice if I could see it as well. That'd be great. But otherwise, I'll stick with you guys. You know, audio wise. Yeah, because it says Safari cannot open this page because the network connection was lost. So I was like,
We'll get started right at 6 o'clock. There it is, 6 p.m. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's public hearing. My name is John Urino. I'm the zoning examiner for the city of Tucson. We have two cases on the docket tonight. The first case is case TPENT 1022-00001 Superstar Car Wash. Mr. Beal, are you going to present the staff report, or Mr. Struve, will you?
I'll be presenting the staff report, Mr. Urino.
Thank you. Mr. Struve, go right ahead.
Very good, thank you. This item is a request to rezone approximately 1.27 acres from C1 to C2 commercial in the South Harrison neighborhood. The site is located approximately 400 feet east of the intersection of East Golf Links Road and South Pantano Parkway on Golf Links Road. The rezoning would allow for the construction of a full-service car wash on currently vacant land. The use, which requires C2 zoning, is classified as an automotive washing full-service car wash by the Unified Development Code. The proposed rezoning area is covered by Plan Tucson, the South Pantano Area Plan, and the Pantano East Plan. It is consistent with the policies contained within all three plans. 2 approvals and 3 protests were received for the site. Concerns expressed in the protest generally centered around noise, traffic, and the need for the car wash. A noise impact study was conducted as part of the design compatibility report. The study concluded that the project-only operational noise levels would be within the city's daytime residential and commercial limits as outlined by the city's noise ordinance. A traffic impact analysis was also conducted. It concluded that all approaches and intersections would continue to operate at an acceptable level with the proposed development. The Planning and Development Services Department has reviewed this request and recommends approval of the rezoning subject to the submitted preliminary conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Struve. Is the applicant present and wanting to speak?
Yes, thank you. For your record.
Good evening. Thank you for attending, and go ahead and start with your name and address, Mr. Greathouse.
Thank you. Appreciate you taking the time to hear this case tonight. For your record, my name is Brian Greathouse with the law firm Birch and Cracchiolo. Our address is 1850 North Central Avenue in Phoenix. Can I share my screen? I have some visual aids.
You may, please go ahead.
First, I'd like to say that we appreciate staff's recommendation of approval. We agree with all the findings in the staff report, and we're okay with stipulations number 1 through 15 as sent out in our revised stipulation list that we received today. There were a couple minor revisions to the staff report. As Carver presented, the site is located east of Pantano Wash on the south side of Golf Links Road. It's an approximately 1.21 acre site. It's shown in blue on the screen here. To the north of the site, across the street from Golf Links, is a variety of different commercial type uses, and some offices flank those commercial uses on the west side. The site is adjacent to an existing Circle K gas station, and east of the site is a planned Big O tire store that recently came through this zoning examiner process and city council. To the south are residential homes. The site is vacant today. I didn't attend the neighborhood meeting, but I understand that some neighbors expressed issues with existing vagrancy on the site and graffiti. So we think development on the site's a good thing to clean up some of those issues that have been ongoing over the years. The site is zoned C1 today. We're requesting a rezoning to C2 to allow a new express car wash that is intended to be owned and operated by Superstar Car Wash. And in addition to that car wash, there's also 31 self-serve vacuums that are offered as free service. This is the site plan here. The access to the site is off of Golf Links Road via an existing driveway, so there's no changes to that driveway location proposed here. There's also cross access planned to the Circle K to the west and the Big O Tire business to the east. As you can see on the slide, there's a distance of about 120 feet from the south property line to the south edge of the proposed car wash tunnel. At the neighborhood meeting, some neighbors asked Superstar to make sure that it was an east-west oriented car wash tunnel, which it is. And also they asked for potential additional height on their existing residential walls, which Superstar agreed to do, subject to approval from a structural engineer to make sure that the wall was sound enough to add some more courses to the top. And that's addressed in stipulation number 14 in the draft stipulations. Superstar hired a sound company, and that was MD Acoustics. They measured sound levels anticipated at various sites, various points around the site. The two that are probably most applicable here are receptor number 2 and number 3, which are at the north edge of the existing homes. As you can see on this slide, the projected noise levels at those locations are 42 decibels and 43 decibels, which are much less than the daytime limit allowed in the noise ordinance. So the operational noise levels, as Carver said, comply with the city's daytime residential and commercial limits as outlined in that noise ordinance. That is the end of the presentation. We request your approval, Mr. Zoning Examiner, and we request that approval is consistent with the staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I just had 2 questions about the conditions. One, I noted that the vacuum turbines are all enclosed indoors, but some equipment is outdoors. And I appreciate the fact that your noise study demonstrates compliance with the noise code, but I'm wondering, what is the outdoor aspect of the vacuum cleaning that would generate noise? If the turbine's inside, is it just the suction you would hear from the vacuum being operated, or is there machinery outside?
There's no engines outside or machinery. The engines that produce the noise are within an enclosed room as part of the building. The only thing that those engines obviously create the suction that go through the tubes to the vacuum, the little plastic vacuum holder. But the noise, if that motor was not in an enclosed room, it would be very loud. So that's why it's in the room, and it doesn't cause an issue.
The other question I have is on the condition relating to the wall. There were 2 aspects of that I wanted to ask you about, Mr. Greathouse. The first is actually within the text of it. It seemed to indicate, it wasn't as clear to me as the condition that we imposed with respect to the Big O Tire store, that it seemed to have some, and I don't think I'm saying this is your intent, but some wiggle room on whether the wall would have to be raised at all, talking about whether doing it after the COO is raised if attenuation is needed. And so I just want to give you a heads up that my intent would be to revise that condition to make it clear that the wall will be raised up and that will happen before the COO is granted. I'm not sure if you've seen the Big O Tire rezoning file or the condition there, but it will track. My intent is it would track the condition placed there.
Okay, I believe that's okay with my client, Superstar Car Wash. The intent of the stipulation was always first talk to a structural engineer to see if it if additional courses can be added to the wall, and then contact would be made with each neighbor, because obviously each neighbor would have to allow the additional height on the wall.
Understood. And then, so that's my second question. That relates to, we didn't have that condition or that caveat on the Big O Tire location. So, I mean, I understand your client's concern. What if the wall won't bear another course and a half or 2 courses of block or whatever it's made out of? But in that case, you're going to be building a new wall. So better for your client if they get to just add on. So I'm not enamored of the idea, because we put a condition on it. What if the structural person says you can't do this? Then we have a rezoning file that's approved rezoning subject to a condition that can occur. So, I mean, you can have it either way. The cleanest way, I believe, is just to have the same language that we used in Big O, just requiring you to offer to the property owners to increase the size or the height of their wall. And if they accept the offer, then you'll do that before a C of O is issued.
Okay, my assistant here is calling our client to make sure that they're okay with that.
Sure. And, you know, the way this process works anyway is I issue first a preliminary report within 5 working days or next Thursday, and then a final report after that. So there's time in between tonight and any final report that you can work that out. Because my suggestion would be that they just get somebody to go out now and do it. I mean, it's not a time consuming. Since I'm not doing it, it's not time consuming, right? It's not a huge endeavor. So I appreciate your answers. And if you get clarification tonight, fine. If that's later, you can certainly respond to Planning and Development Services. Like I say, my preliminary report comes out in a week, and then the final report a week after. All right?
Okay. The client says he's fine with everything you said.
Cool.
He just
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Now, is anyone else in the audience wishing to be heard on this rezoning case, the Superstar Car Wash case? If so, please speak up and start with your name and address. And if you could turn off your screen sharing, Mr. Greathouse, that would be great. Hearing no one, I conclude that no one wants to be heard. I appreciate your participation. I'm sorry, go right ahead. Please start with your name and address.
Sure. Alfred Valdez. My address is 2526 South Perillo Drive in Tucson, Arizona.
Okay, Mr. Valdez, go right ahead.
Okay, I'm located north of that proposed car wash that you're doing in the Big O. I happen to be on Perillo, which goes perpendicular to Golf Links, which is going to be right in the heart of these businesses that are creating. I'm concerned, in previous times that I've seen, I've been here for 20-some years at this location, any kind of variation of traffic due to accidents and such construction, they've used our street, Perillo Drive, as an access to circumvent the intersection there. With these two businesses creating more of a traffic, people are going to tend to go through this driveway more and more because it circumvents that intersection at Pantano Parkway and Golf Links. Have you guys assessed that? Because I would hate to have speedsters going through here from the car wash and the Big O, and end up having a little race car situation in my neighborhood, not to mention the noise as well, because it's going to affect everything, no doubt about it, but I understand progress is progress. But have you guys assessed that?
Mr. Greathouse, if you'd like to respond to Mr. Valdez, that would be great.
Yeah, we have submitted a traffic study. It's been reviewed. I can't remember if it's been approved by city staff yet, but that's part of the development plan review process. Car washes are a somewhat low generation of traffic because most of the trips are what we call pass-by trips. So the trips are already on the roadway, and it's a convenience use where people will stop to get their car washed on their way home from work or to work. It's not a real destination type use. So in that respect, it's not a bringing in too many new vehicles. And the site zone C1 today, and if you look at the list of permitted uses under C1 and you compare that to a car wash, my opinion would be that the car wash is on the low end of traffic generation from what's already permitted to be constructed on the site. So I hear the concerns. I wouldn't want that down my street either. But I think this use is a fairly low traffic generation use here.
And Mr. Greathouse, remind me or correct me if I'm wrong, the access for your customers will be through a curb cut on Golf Links or through the Circle K property to the west.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Valdez, did you have anything else you wanted to share with us?
The only other thing, if it does prove in the future, if this development does continue, and this transpires as far as traffic and whatnot, would they be against maybe putting speed bumps or something to act to the neighborhood drive, to the road, Perillo Drive, basically, to reduce the speed of those vehicles? Because when you back out, you don't expect a 40-mile car going through there, and you could miss it and end up in an accident.
Mr. Greathouse, any reaction to that?
I don't know if I know the answer to that. Every city is a little bit different, and they have their own traffic mitigation programs for requesting speed bumps and those sort of things on public roads. I'm not quite sure of City of Tucson's program for that.
I think Mr. Valdez may be asking about within the development itself, and as opposed to on the city streets.
Oh, I thought he was talking about his street, which is, what street was that?
I think he was asking about cut through traffic. I could be wrong. I mean, we're hearing the same. Mr. Valdez is speaking. We're both hearing him.
I would not be opposed to either one of those, preferably earlier than later. I like your proposal first, as far as anything to prevent things from happening later on.
Understood. Well, thank you for that. And I'm certain that Mr. Greathouse and his client will bear in mind measures that could be taken if a problem develops.
Yeah, my client has a good reputation for communication with their community and neighbors. So I'd say yes, that they're very accessible.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez. Anyone else in the audience like to be heard on this case?
Hi, this is Chris Fiel. I live at 8759 East Perry Park Circle. It's the neighborhood south of where the car wash is going to be. And so is there a reason why the traffic light at that Pantano Parkway and Golf Links Road can't include a left arrow for north and southbound traffic? Because that's just that's the issue that we have in our side of town, is that so when you have the southbound traffic going to the car wash, and if there's a big O tire next to it, and if there's future developments on that land, like I'm sure there's probably going to be other future developments since it's still vacant, there's a lot of people that turn left at that light. And usually when, I'm always trying to go northbound on Pantano Parkway, and a lot of cars just keep turning left, even though I'm trying to go straight. And it also happens if you're trying to go southbound, for whatever reason, the northbound traffic, trying to turn left, they just keep going. I've emailed the Department of Transportation and also submitted requests through the C-ClickFix app that's on the Tucson, the city council website. So I'm wondering, with all this new development, should the infrastructure also be updated to support all of it? I don't know if you can include that in your report and maybe like make a recommendation. Like it's been reported on. There's some people in the neighborhood who's even gone to like Nikki Lee within Ward, I think 6, to ask about it, but there hasn't really been any development.
So I missed your last name, Chris. So I'll just call you Chris, if that's okay. So that is outside the purview really of this rezoning case, but I can certainly note in my report the concern that you raised regarding left turn arrows at that intersection. That tends to be sort of a bigger picture, if you will, analysis on traffic patterns and not particular to a particular development, if you will. But I certainly will do that, and I would commend you on your outreach. Both Department of Transportation and Mobility and Councilwoman Lee's office are the right places to be asking about that.
Okay.
Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard on this case?
Hi, my name is Ken Todd. I'm at 8731 East Perry Park Circle, so I too am in the development south of the car wash. My house is not against the wall on the other side of the car wash. In fact, I'm as far from the car wash as any house in the development. But my concern is that the level of noise is going to be greater than what's anticipated. I have been by the car wash that's next to Costco there on Grant Road, and I find the level of noise there to be higher and at least unacceptable for a car wash that would be located next to a housing development. And if that's the case, then I'd be concerned that if the noises are higher, that property values of many of the homeowners that live particularly near where the car wash is going in is going to be depressed.
Well, thank you for sharing your concern. Mr. Greathouse, would you just recap for the gentleman your sound study, and maybe you can give an example. I know the sound study showed 42 decibels at the south end, I guess it is, of the beginning, if you will, of the residential development. And maybe you could describe what that reading is in my terms, which are regular terms. 42 is just a number to me. I know it's within what the sound code allows, but can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a slide on that. I just didn't want to bore you guys too much. That's right. The anticipated level is 42 at the property line. And that's through a lot of studies that MD Acoustics has done for Superstar Car Wash. And depending on when the car wash, Ken made a comment about another car wash, equipment changes and noise equipment changes and improvements are being made all the time in this industry. So I don't know how old that other car wash is, but this is a brand new development, and Superstar is well known in the industry as using the highest and best state-of-the-art equipment, not only in noise, but also with reclaimed water and things like that. So here's on the left-hand side of this slide, it shows the different noise levels for different things in our lives, right? Like, so heavy traffic at 300 feet away is about 63 decibels. 40 is what's known as a quiet urban nighttime. And I don't know exactly what the ambient conditions are out there. Typically on a road like Golf Links Drive, it's in the ballpark of about mid 50s, high 50s. So the noise from this development should be similar to or less than the ambient conditions. So it kind of gets washed out with our everyday noises that we hear that we don't notice because they're just kind of there going, ooh, you know. There's not a lot of bang that will come from this development.
Thank you, Mr. Greathouse, and thank you, Ken, for participating tonight.
Well-
Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard on this case?
I will say that
Yes.
car wash that just went in.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ken.
We'll say that the car wash that just went in next to Costco on Grant Road has only been there like 2 years tops, so it's fairly modern, fairly new.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you. And I heard another voice. Please go ahead.
Yes, my name is Kelly Smith Iniguez. I live at 8784 East Perry Park Circle, so that same neighborhood. I'm one of the homes that is directly adjacent to the car wash, and I have one of the smallest backyards. I would say I have perhaps 8 feet from my house to the wall, so I will probably be one of the most affected because I'm closest, and all of the bedrooms, I believe, on all of our houses are abutting that wall. You mentioned that the height of the wall would be increased. By how much would that increase?
The current stipulation says 18 inches.
Okay, and then another question I have is, as Ken mentioned, the noise of the exterior vacuums, even if it's just the whooshing noise as people uses them passing by, seems very loud. And of course, you know, this is 10 feet from my home because my backyard is so small. What are the hours of operation that those vacuums could be used?
There's a stipulation that is included in the staff report, stipulation number 11, that says hours of operation shall not exceed 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily, and that all noise producing services and activities shall be limited to the hours of business, and other noise generating mechanical equipment shall be turned off during non-business hours.
And then what about lighting? Again, because our bedrooms are all to the rear, what sort of lighting would we expect at, you know, during the night hours?
There's a stipulation number 10 that addresses the lighted signs. Those are to be turned off during non-business hours. And the only other lighting on the site will be low-level parking lighting, and those lights are shielded. And I believe, Carver, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I believe there's a code requirement where you can't emit more than 1 foot candle at your property line.
That's correct. This would go on. This would be subject to the Pima County Lighting Code.
Those were my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard? Hearing no one, and Mr. Greathouse, do you have anything further?
I have something to say. I was
Okay.
on,
Go right ahead. Start with your name and address, please.
yes, Susan Nicholas, 8768 East Perry Park Circle. So I'm in that same property. And I really think that it's kind of deceptive to say that the whole thing is going to be noise like a quiet urban night, because if you have 31 people there using those vacuums, you're going to hear that above and beyond what the noise is on the road. And I really don't think the blocks are going to help that much. I think between the two things that are happening, the Big O and this is by far the noisier as far as I can see. And I just don't feel it is compatible with so close of a residential community. And that's my main concern.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard on this case? Mr. Greathouse, anything else?
No, to address that noise concern, there are various points on the site that will have louder noise levels, but where we studied it at the south property line, we think it'll be dissipated for all the reasons that I presented.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I want to thank everyone who participated. And Mr. Greathouse, thank you. Our next case, and you need to shut down your share again. Thank you for that. Our next case is a reopened public hearing in case C92210. Would the applicant like to be heard?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Urino. I do have a presentation. So as soon as that pops up, if you all could let me know it's on your screen, that would be great.
Okay, we're there.
Perfect. Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for having us again this evening. For the record, my name is Lexi Well, and I'm a project manager at the Planning Center. We are located at 2 East Congress, Suite 600 in downtown Tucson.
We're getting some feedback, so if everyone else could turn off their sound now, that would be good. Go right ahead, Lexi.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Again, my name is Lexi Wellen. I'm a project manager at the Center. I'm also joined this evening by Linda Morales, who is joining virtually via phone, as well as Brian Underwood and Garrett Aldred, who are also planners here at the Planning Center. We'll have Bill Carroll with Engineering Environmental Consultants, Inc. online, as well as the Oopsie. Can you hear me? Am I coming through okay?
I can now. You cut out about 15 seconds ago for some reason.
Okay, well, you know our team. It's the same team that was here last time. So,
we heard all that.
In any event, we appreciate your time this evening and your reconsideration of our rezoning proposal. Considering that our last presentation was quite extensive, I'm going to keep my remarks as brief as possible, and we'll recap our original proposal and as what has transpired since for everyone in attendance, for anyone who was not there. So to jump right into this property, the subject property we are looking to rezone is located at 8646 East Tankerverde Road, approximately 1/4 mile west of the intersection of Bear Canyon Road and East Tankerverde Road. The property is approximately 6.11 acres in size and is currently vacant, with disturbances associated with the dilapidated pond structure that is highlighted on the screen and other previous users of the site.
Your screen share went away. That doesn't bother me, but just want to let you know.
Okay. So I can keep talking. As I mentioned previously, there are patches of native desert scrub and some native non-volunteer or volunteer plant species on the site, although they appear to be old and distressed due to the lack of maintenance and the evident sheet flow traversing the site. The Farringer Wash is located about 300 feet of the subject property, and the Tankerverde Creek is about 2,000 feet south of the property. However, the northern limits of each wash's floodplain crosses the southern portion of our property. As an infill site, this property has infrastructure and utilities, and it's all available to serve the proposed development. God damn it.
Your slides are up now.
Can you?
They were up.
Can you hear us come through?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties over here, obviously. But again, this property is located outside of the Bear Canyon neighborhood plan. It's not a part of any platted subdivision, and the area surrounding this site can generally be characterized as single family residential with an evident transition of development intensity as you move towards Tanque Verde Road. Last month, we proposed to rezone the subject property from SR to R2 for the development of 54 single-family casita or build-for-rent units with an overall density of 8.83 units to the acre in response to the housing supply shortages the community is facing and the increasing desirability for this housing type, as well as this part of housing in this particular portion of the city. In designing this community, our team originally looked at ways to lessen the impacts of the proposed community on adjacent properties. We did this by internalizing most of our units in parking and minimizing the number of units located on the perimeter. We also increased building setbacks and landscape buffers where feasible and restricted every unit to a single story in height. After hearing testimony from myself and several other members of the public, you, Ms. Trino, closed the public hearing and concluded the meeting. On December 22nd, you issued a preliminary report with the findings suggesting that our proposal is not in compliance with policy direction presented in Plan Tucson, as it does not maintain the character of existing neighborhoods, nor does it promote environmentally sensitive design. On December 22nd, our team submitted additional information to clarify our proposal and requested to open the public hearing, in which you had granted, and what leads us here today. So I wanted to take the time to kind of walk through what our reconsideration letter suggested, as well as what transpired as a result of looking further at and exploring ways to promote better environmentally sensitive design. So we're trying to get my presentation pulled up here, but I'll continue to go and we can jump back as the graphics come up, because for some reason it keeps crashing on our end when we try and share. So I don't know what's going on, but in any event, when examining the overall context of the neighborhood surrounding the subject property to the north, east, south, and west, one must consider not only the existing designations, but also the current land uses that are surrounding the site. So one point of contention that was discussed previously was the fact that the property is surrounded by SR or R1 properties. However, we must consider not only the function of those, the zoning of those, but their function. And in looking at the overall context, not all of these residentially zoned properties that surround our site actually are occupied with single family uses themselves. And then beyond those SR zones, we have office, commercial, and high density residential uses located directly across Tanque Verde Road, as well as to the east of our property. So I'm looking a little bit more closely at the context of the surrounding area. Directly west of our property is Tucson Fire Station number 21, a public use that is designed and functions more similar to a commercial business or office than a single family residence. However, it's zoned SR. Just south of that fire station is a single family residence under the same ownership as the Greenway Pet Clinic, a commercial business providing veterinarian and animal boarding services. Again, zoned SR, but not functioning as an SR use per se. The single family home that's effectively located between these two non-residential uses on the western portion of our property, despite their existing SR zoning, suggests that a land use transition is appropriate as development moves from Tanque Verde Wash closer towards Tanque Verde Road. Beyond the immediately adjacent properties to the west is the Bandolero Ranch, also an SR zone property with which per their website offers a high-end equine sports facility that offers Western and English training programs, breeding programs, and veterinarian and animal services. The Bandolero Ranch property contains the Farringer Wash and its floodplain, 100-year and 500-year floodplains associated with the Tanque Verde Wash, and has been entirely
We lost your audio, Lexi. Lexi, can you hear me?
Hello?
Are you, Lexi, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you guys all hear me?
No, you cut out about half a minute ago.
What was the last thing you heard from me? Where did I leave off? I apologize, everyone.
Well, we heard about the Bandolero Ranch, and then you're moving on from there.
Okay, so the Bandolero Ranch is yet another example of an SR zone property that functions more as an intensive use, and in this case was not designed to be sensitive to the environment or its surrounding neighbors. Looking to the east, the existing neighborhood context depicts a mix of residential and non-residential zoning and uses, with the Farringer Wash acting as the border for development intensity. This is evidenced by the existing development along Tanque Verde, including the Bear Path Center and the Wright Space Storage facilities located immediately south of the businesses at Bears Path. Wright Space Storage is surrounded by low-density, single-family residential uses on 3 sides. Given this, one might ask themselves, if commercial uses can serve as a buffer from Tanque Verde Road and a transition into low-density residential neighborhoods, then why can't medium-density residential serve as a function to, or serve as a transition to the existing neighborhoods? This pattern of medium density residential serving as a buffer between higher density residential uses and single family homes is evident on the north side of Tanque Verde Road with Cortland Las Casas, the same type of development as this proposal, and can be found throughout the Tanque Verde Valley and other parts of Tucson, especially on parcels adjacent to major arterial roadways. Based on the evident transitions that are reflected in the area's existing development patterns and encouraged by Plan Tucson and the Bear Canyon neighborhood, we believe Casita Village at Tanque Verde does maintain the existing character of the area by providing a development type that preserves the area's residential character as opposed to the northern portion of the property, which could potentially develop with a logical non-residential use consistent with those uses along Tanque Verde and on either side of the property. Furthermore, Casita Village is designed as an entirely single-story development that will function entirely like a single-family home, with each residence occupied by one family and including private backyards, attractive landscaping, and neighborhood amenities. So just since the graphic is up on the screen, I hope you all can see this coming through. The transition that I'm talking about here, Mr. Urino, is as you can see in this exhibit on the screen here, while all of the properties to the west of us are zoned SR, much of them are actually non-residential uses that function with what are traditionally known as higher intensity non-residential uses, as opposed to the residential use we're proposing here. So when I say the Farringer Wash is often the dividing factor of this, this is evidenced by the clear allowance of the city to develop these properties as non-residential uses that are allowed in the SR zone, albeit. But that being said, there is a clear transition in intensity as we move from the Wash to Tanque Verde Road. And it's further evidenced on this side where the Bear Canyon Commercial Center is then transitioning into the neighborhood by way of a self-storage development that then abuts low density residential. So that my case in point here is if this development on the north side of Tanque Verde Road, which is effectively what we are proposing, was an acceptable treatment that buffered single family, large lot, suburban ranch property, why is this transition not logical down here, given the housing shortages, et cetera, the community is facing? So that's our rationale, and we believe that we are consistent with policy direction per Plan Tucson, as it suggests that medium density residential is an appropriate and allowable use adjacent to Tanque Verde. And we are further transitioning into this low intensity neighborhood by providing a residential use and maintaining the residential character of the neighborhood, as opposed to it developing as a portion of office or commercial with higher generating traffic uses, etc. So now, regarding your conclusions that Casita Village at Tanque Verde does not promote environmentally sensitive design, we must take a moment to analyze the site's existing characters and some of the best practices of environmental sensitive design. Aside from the floodplains that traverse the southern portion of the site, which have generally not been avoided by other existing developments, and the largely distressed vegetation on site, the property does not contain any riparian habitats, any formalized mapped riparian habitats, steep slopes, wildlife corridors, or other sensitive characteristics. In fact, the site has been entirely disturbed by previous owners. Best practices of environmental sensitive design suggest that a walkable infill community like the one we are proposing with Casita Village at Tanque Verde is more conducive to preserving the natural environment, as urban sprawl and car dependency and in turn vehicle miles traveled are reduced. Recognizing that the previously prepared development plan substantially encroached into the floodplains associated with the Farringer Wash and the Tanque Verde Creek, and having heard concerns expressed by you and those in attendance at last month's meeting, our team went back to the drawing board to reconfigure the site plan to minimize our encroachment and to better promote environmentally sensitive design. So on the screen before you this evening is the plan that we've resubmitted. And over the past few weeks, our team has diligently worked to revise our plan to reduce encroachment in the floodplains, as well as present a plan that now proposes to rezone the 6.11 acre site from SR to R2 for the development of 47 single-story casita units at an overall density of 7.69 units to the acre instead of 54 and an overall density of 8.3 units to the acres. As you can see, and unlike the previous iterations, which proposed significant disturbance and encroachment into the both floodplains that traverse our site, the revised preliminary development plan completely avoids floodplain associated with the Farringer Wash and significantly reduces encroachment into the Tanque Verde Creek floodplain to the greatest extent feasible and practicable. Ultimately, our revisions preserve much of the significant vegetations on the southern end of the site that neighbors spoke about, and more than half of the floodplain is now left as open space. In addition to decreasing the encroachment, we minimize disturbance within the floodplain to the best of our ability to the elements that are allowed to occur within the floodplain. Those are vehicle and pedestrian access ways, drainage infrastructure, recreation amenities, etc. Similar to what was discussed at the previous hearing, those elements would have to be elevated out of the floodplain. But granted our significant reduction in the encroachment, it's anticipated that film could be less now, since the encroachment is significantly less. So in comparison, the revised preliminary development requires now that only 2.5 units be raised out of the floodplain and amounts to only 12% disturbance, as opposed to the 14 units that previously had to be raised out of the floodplain and the 100% disturbance that was previously proposed. We also took consideration of your comments and questions, Mr. Guarino, regarding drainage, and incorporated additional basins throughout our development and rainwater harvesting infrastructure to disperse drainage more evenly throughout the site and better mitigate stormwater runoff that exists today from adjacent developments and the roadway and travels through our site. So to maintain the existing, in addition to, before I move on, we revised some of our elements here to hopefully create more of a conducive development that is sensitive to the neighbor. So reconfiguring drainage basins to provide greater setbacks from the most closest residential neighbors as possible, and reducing the number of units that are directly adjacent to them. And I have a slide that gets more specific to that. But I want to highlight again on this notion of maintaining the existing character of the neighborhood adjacent to the property, because our team really did an excellent job looking at this and in our proposal for reconfiguring our layout to promote a better transition from the higher intensity nature of Tankerverde Road and its uses to the less intensive residential properties to the south and east of the site. So if you could go to the next slide for me. So I wanted to bring this slide back up here to look at this logical transition and uses that could occur, albeit again, a potential rezoning would be necessary, but because of the adjacent uses and the transition that's effectively been established, it's appropriate to suggest that the northern third of our property that aligns with the O3 zone property could handle more density and intensity on that site. So considering this, we reconfigured the site plan to increase the proposed number of units located in the northern third of the site in line with the adjacent commercial and office uses, while decreasing the number of units as you move southwardly. For comparison, and I'm going to toggle between a slide here so you can see, for comparison, the previous proposed PDP proposed 16 units south of that line that we're talking about. The new plan, the previous PDP proposed 16 units north of that line and 38 units south of that line. And now the new preliminary development plan that we are proposing pushes all of that development up to Tankerverde Road and depicts 30 units in line with those neighboring commercial and office uses and 17 adjacent to those less intensive uses. We've also increased the separation between those less intensive uses and those that are directly the closest and most impacted units on the property. So with these, the reallocation of the density and our approach to our approach to improving the environmentally sensitive design of our site, we believe that this site better maintains the character of the area and supports policies suggested, supports and furthers policies suggested by Plan Tucson. So with that, I will open it up to Mr. Carroll. Do you have anything to add here, Bill, that I maybe missed and you would like to hit on?
The only thing I would offer, and I apologize for not having my face on your screen, although you probably won't miss it that much. But sometimes when my face comes up, my voice goes away. So the only other thing I would offer is, while we have decreased the amount of encroachment into the floodplain of both the Feringer and the Tankerverde Creek, as I had reported last time, and I know nobody likes to hear about encroachments, but as I had reported last time, even with the amount of encroachment that you had proposed previously, we were under the FEMA and City of Tucson regulations in terms of negative impacts of encroachment. And so consequently, we are now even more under the negative impacts and allowable for allowable encroachments. And moving the units a little bit farther away from the eastern property line will provide more of a buffer to the neighbors to the east, but will also allow more room for the drainage to spill off the properties to the east and allow us to be able to bring it into basins and within the development. And if there are any other questions relative to drainage or utilities, I'd be happy to answer them.
Bill, I do have one.
Absolutely.
So I understand that the revised development plan moves a fair amount of development out of the floodplain, with some amount still in the floodplain, but much less in the floodplain than had been previously proposed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, I may have misunderstood, but you can set me straight. Why then was there perceived a need to add additional drainage basins?
The drainage basins that we had originally in there are approximate in size until we really get in and do full hydrology on the site. We've done some preliminary hydrology. We felt that having a basin over closer to the eastern property line would allow us to be able to immediately handle the water as it came off the neighboring properties to the east. So we added another basin. The basins, the two original basins probably become smaller.
Right. Don't get me wrong. If you think basins need to be built, everyone should be for basins if they're going to have the development there in any event. You want to retain the water on site and not spill it out to somebody else's property for there to have a problem.
All right, it increases our opportunity for water harvesting as well.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Willett, did you have anything further now?
I do not, Mr. Urino, unless you do.
No, I don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was a very helpful presentation and addressed some of my concerns. Now, I've had, as is always the practice, we've had a number of people who've requested to speak tonight. I will say that I am always open to hearing everything everyone wants to say. I will also say that although I don't have a perfect auditory memory, those of you who spoke last time are welcome to speak again, but I do remember what people said last time. So with that gentle suggestion, we'll start with Julie Tabor. Is Ms. Tabor present?
Yes.
Okay,
Hi.
you have to start with your name and address, even though I just said your name.
My name is Julie Tabor, and I live at 8760 East Bears Path Road. And my house borders right along the Feringer Wash. I'm having to do this through my phone because I'm a passenger in a car, so I don't have slides, but I did email them to you. I have real concerns with this continued drainage. The Feringer Wash has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and we also have water that's coming down the road. We currently have 2 infractions that have not been addressed by the city that are in violation of FEMA and of code. We've had a tremendous amount of damage to our home as a result of planning. We experienced a 15,000-gallon raw sewage flood in our home due to poor planning of the sewage line. Last year, we had another major, well, let me back up too, just to let you know, we had to move out of our home for 5 years. We were in a lawsuit with the city, and let me tell you, you cannot sue the city. It was horrendous for our family. Then we had another big event, and I sent you those pictures, all the water coming across and all the soot in front of the house. Our pool was completely flooded from the Feringer Wash. Our backyard was complete soot. The front yard was complete soot. My husband went out into the street. He slipped and he fell, cracked his head open, and dislocated his jaw. So we take these water issues very seriously. We're having property damage. You know, I have written numerous emails to the city saying, look, you know, our house is in danger, personally at risk with this environment. And so we just don't want to see any more discharge in the Feringer Wash. It's out of control. I don't know if you saw the slides that I sent in.
I did see the slides, yes, and I would like to speak to the whole audience now. I have reviewed every piece of paper, electronic or otherwise, that have been filed with the PDSD office up through tonight's hearing. But go right ahead, Ms. Tabor. If you weren't finished, please go ahead.
I mean, so the sewage lines are we haven't seen that, are a big deal. I'm very uncomfortable with sewage lines going through a flood area because if they breach, we're going to have another catastrophic event, either at my house or surrounding neighbors. in addition, the traffic is a real concern. My daughter will read a letter to you when you call on her. She, I don't know if you had the chance to read it, but the traffic is just insane coming off of Tanque Verde from our house. It's just near impossible to get across, and this is only going to add to it. The traffic study doesn't talk about all of the U-turns that need to be made to travel going west. I know that there's other people that will talk about that, but I wanted to make mention of it. Another real issue I have is that living with the construction, big, huge equipment trucks coming in and having to make a U-turn at Bears Path. It's just, just a very dangerous situation. We are we're horse property. We're the closest in horse property in Tucson. And Woodland is just a gem. That whole loop is just a gem. And so to change the character and to take away from our lifestyle is I think, what we're all complaining about. I don't have a problem with that area being developed as long as it's within the current zoning.
Thank you, Ms. Tabor. The next person on my list is Ella Tabor. We'll come back to Ms. Tabor. The next person is David Culbertson. Mr. Culbertson, are you present?
I am present. Good evening. How's everybody doing?
Doing very well, thank you. Start with your address, please.
10840 East Placida Metate.
Thank you very much. Go right ahead.
Great. I just want to, as a 30-year resident out here, and having seen this change over time, I was going to share a map of the roadway, but the planning center slide is up right now. I just would like to piggyback a little bit on the traffic issues we're experiencing out here. I think it's great they were willing to cut back on the amount of development there, but I believe we're still at 47 homes. Vice 54, is that a good number?
That's the number they say, yes.
Okay, so up to 94 cars. And as you travel through this area here, from a resident perspective, things really start to deteriorate as you get close to the Tanque Verde Lutheran Church, either way. And then the aforementioned Tanque Verde casitas across the way when they were added. And then we have two now fairly major arteries in Bear Canyon and in Catalina Highway. When I moved here, we were really out in the country. That whole stretch of road at times during the day, in my opinion, cannot stand another 94 cars trying to figure out head to head west on Tanque Verde Road. And in case everybody's not aware, there's another high density development going in up Catalina Highway on the other side of the Bear Canyon apartments that, again, the county or the city, I believe it's in the county, have not done anything to mitigate the increased flow out of that. Just that alone, I just have to parrot the previous speaker's comments about maintaining the current zoning on the property right there. Interesting that the planning center brought up a bunch of opposite uses or uses that aren't consistent with the zoning around there. But I would contend that most of those are fairly low density, low impact from a traffic impact. And I think we'd probably rather see another business next to East Tanque Verde Road along the roadway that has low intensity traffic on that size piece of property versus the potential for another, as a minimum, 47 to 94 cars. This is not a part of the the city, the Tanque Verde Valley. You basically have to have a vehicle to get around out here. And until those situations are resolved in some way, I don't think things like this should be added in the area anymore. And I think I'm starting to get repetitious. Just for my information, can staff kind of break down some of the verbiage that's been used this evening? Apologize for my ignorance. I've heard high intensity. I've heard high density, medium density, and low density. And a couple other terms that obviously is in the vernacular of zoning. Could somebody explain what some of those mean?
I don't think we're here for that, Mr. Culberson, with all due respect. I think my understanding of those terms as they were used by Lexi in her presentation are just the ordinary language uses. They were not being used as terms of art within the zoning code. So I think you and I probably heard and understood the same things.
So that was their use of those terms as they see things?
I'd say so. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate your participation, and I'm sorry the screen share wasn't available. It is available now if you want to share your screen, although I believe I understood your testimony quite well.
I won't waste anybody's time then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your participation. The next person I'll call on is Garrett Cunningham. Mr. Cunningham?
Yes, Mr. Areno, I had a PowerPoint and information to share, but as you just said that if we send everything into you, you have taken it into consideration. So should I share that or?
I totally leave it up to you. My intent in this process is for everyone to have an opportunity to be heard. I have reviewed everyone's comments, and if anyone sent along, I did see the photos that Julie Tabor referred to. So totally up to you. I serve here at everyone's pleasure.
I could skim through it real quick. I won't say everything I was going to say then, and just kind of run through it quickly if you don't mind me sharing the screen.
Not at all. Go right ahead.
Did it click over?
Not yet, but sometimes there's a tiny delay.
Okay.
Share.
It's coming now.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
This is the waterway coming out of the.
If it's a visual, it's probably going to take a little longer to load. I just have a white screen now.
Okay.
The photographs and videos sometimes take a bit longer.
If it doesn't come up, I don't want to.
All right. And for what it's worth, I don't live out that way. I have been out to the property 3 times before the first hearing, after the second hearing, and again today. So I am familiar with the property, and I am familiar with going down Woodland, the loop around, and the development and non-development in different areas around there.
Okay. Well, what I have up on the screen right now is the water coming out of the shopping center, which come out of 2 about 12-inch culverts and dump onto Bears Path Road. The water goes down Bears Path Road, which I have videos and photos up on the screen, and it crosses the road onto multiple properties, and particularly ours, which we're at 8720 East Bears Path Road, and goes through our property I have a photo up now of the water going through the property.
That's a small rain.
And this was just the small rain on Monday. And I have a photo up now showing the water standing at our back wall because of the water coming off of the development at about 6 inches before it can go through the weep holes in the back of our wall. And I just wanted to reiterate, raising that up is going to put back pressure on our neighborhood and our property as well. And I know that they said the south end they chopped off. We haven't had a chance to see that plan and how it was going to affect. So it's kind of hard to respond to something that we're just seeing tonight for the first time. My next point was the resident zoning of R2. I have up on the screen now, and it says this zone provides for medium density, single family and multifamily residential development together with schools, parks, and other public services necessary for an urban residential environment. I don't believe that Woodland and Bears Path is an urban residential environment. I believe it's a suburban residential environment, just like the zoning SR calls for. And it says select other uses such as daycare, urban agriculture, and permitted that provide reasonable compatibility with the adjoining residential uses, which is clearly not the case with this development. I threw up on the screen now the definition of urban, and it says relating or designating a city or a town densely populated in urban areas, located or taking place in a city, as in urban rooftop gardening. And us out in that area, we don't have to garden on our rooftops, we garden out in our yards. The next thing in your packet, which I sent to you, but nobody else has seen, are the City of Tucson road standards. And it says that they need 300 minimum for 2 driveways. And it does call for 2 driveways in 2 different parts of the code. From a speed perspective, when you get up to 45 miles an hour, you need 2 ingress and egress. And for the density, once you get above 30 residents, you need 2 ingress and egress. And when it requires 300 minimum feet in between the 2 driveways, and they only have 243 feet, it doesn't even meet the city standard. I have put a slide up, which you have, Mr. Areno, and it shows those minimum distances as required by the City of Tucson. Now with their development turning, they have 1 driveway, which violates that standard. And when I scale off their drawing, the PAL, which is the distance in the parking lot, the parking lot lanes, they don't scale off. You don't have the required distance, nor do they have the required distance for the parking spaces. So if this gets approved off of this cartoon drawing, they're going to go back and revise things, and they're not even going to be close to what this is because they don't have the clearances even close on this illustration that they've put out. So that's going to cause more issues. And then I've got a screen up now showing a satellite image, which I'm sure you can't see, but when you come in and out of their property, there is no way to reach, if you're headed westbound on Tanque Verde out of their property, there's no way to get westbound on Tanque Verde without hitting Bears Path, which if you look at the distance, it would be a very unsafe lane change coming out of that property to make that U-turn at Bears Path. So they'd have to go down to Bear Canyon. And at Bear Canyon, it already backs up past Bears Path at the busy times of the day. So there would be, at your busy times in the morning and in the afternoon, they're not even going to get out of that property without hitting that backup and being able to cross traffic. And then you get to Catalina Highway, again, you can't make a U-turn. It's prohibited down there. So again, I didn't go through everything I had. I sent everything to you, Mr. Areno, and out of respect, I don't want to, take up a bunch of everybody else's time at this point. So I appreciate your time.
I appreciate your participation, Mr. Cunningham. Thank you very much. The next person is Heidi Schul, SCATWEL. I hope I didn't do that too badly.
No, that's correct. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. My address is 9227 East Lakeside Court, and we're bringing this up now.
Thank you.
Mr. We're gonna have to give her the permission to do that. So I just need to, if there's a phone number, or I'm looking for the name.
Joanne, use Joanne, please.
Are we okay?
We don't have it quite yet.
Just a little bit, but
yeah, you're permitted now, according to what popped up on my screen. So go right ahead, Ms.
Okay,
Jewell.
thank you. Good evening. My name is Heidi Schul. I'm a Tucson native, and I've lived in Tanque Verde Valley for 49 years. I serve as interagency liaison in the lakes at Castle Rock, adjacent to the east of the Bear Canyon Woodland neighborhood. I don't believe this rezoning is in the best interest of our community or our safety or ecologically sound. Further, what I have to say will be magnified by the multiple rezoning requests in our valley. Next slide.
Your slides have not come through. Do you want to try to share again?
Okay.
Your audio is fine.
Thank you. Yeah, because I've got a couple of maps. It's up for me. I've got like 16 slides, so maybe they're taking just a little while to load, do you think?
That's possible, although I don't know.
Okay, we're working on that right now.
No problem.
Thank you. It doesn't look like it's going to come up, so I'll just proceed and I'll try to describe what I was showing in the pictures, although there were some really dramatic ones. The Tanque Verde Valley is located in the far northeastern corner of Tucson, bordered by Coronado National Forest in the Santa Catalina Mountains to the north. And I had a little map that showed that, but we're bordered on the north by a mountain range, and then Saguaro National Park in the Rincon Mountains to the east. These mountains cause our valley to be landlocked with only two directions for ingress and egress, to the south and the west. Status as federal public lands prevents urban development on the forest and the national park. A concern that must be addressed in this area is emergency exit capacity. Wildfire and flooding, and then I had a slide up here of some flooding coming up out of the Tanque Verde Wash into the woodland area 2 days ago. Wildfire and flooding are two potential causes for evacuations of the area. And in your mind, imagine a dramatic flame picture. In recent years, we've seen fire season, which was formerly a summer phenomenon, grow to a year-long in duration. Fire behavior has become extreme, with fires more difficult to suppress due to overstocked forests, dense invasive plants, extended drought, and hotter, drier, and longer summers. The Bighorn Fire in the Santa Catalina Mountains in 2020 was an example. And then I had a picture showing wildfire burning down into the desert. Wildfires don't stay up in the mountains. They burn where the fuels and the winds drive them. The Bighorn Fire was ignited by a lightning strike June 5th that burned almost 120,000 acres before being contained on July 23rd. And this is an important point. As the fire repeatedly burned down into the desert, a number of foothills neighborhoods were evacuated. And then they were evacuated again after the flooding which followed the fire. And that scenario could easily be repeated in our valley with fires coming in from the eastern Santa Catalinas or the northern Rincons. As the Tanque Verde Valley is landlocked, residents can only exit to the south and west in case of an emergency on a limited number of roads, with Tanque Verde leading west and Houghton Road leading south as the main arteries. And as you've heard, traffic on some of these roads already backs up with what we've already got. Adding hundreds more vehicles adds to a problem that may already become unmanageable in an emergency. And when we have these incidents, in the case of wildfire, and I'm not going to talk about floods because other people will talk about that, Winds could push embers up to 5 miles ahead of a flaming front, starting new fires ahead of wildfire, resulting in evacuation orders with little or no notice. And small towns have been consumed from this kind of a movement. With 2 directions to evacuate on limited roadways, how will we get out? The next picture was of a for sale sign. Unfortunately, much of the land in this valley will eventually go up for sale. Buyers generally have one goal: profit through rezoning and building higher densities or resale. Please consider, and here I had a flood photo, please consider the tremendous cost versus benefits when evaluating rezoning applications here. And then if you can imagine a picture of the Bighorn fire burning down on the desert floor at night. When that knock at the door comes in the middle of the night, we need to be able to leave now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schul. The next person is Mr. Donald Rogers or Ms. Suzanne Rogers.
Hello, Suzanne Rogers, representing property 8526 Bandolero, 8500 East Woodland Road, and 8644 Tanque I believe it was Lexi who was speaking for the planning center. She talked about Bandolero Ranch, which we are directly west of the proposed property. And Bandolero Ranch is an allowed use of SR zoning. No rezoning for us was required. When we built Bandolero Ranch, we were strictly limited on hard surfaces, whether it was building or asphalt. Also, I would like to add that according to how they have their map laid out and they're talking about Greenway Pet Clinic, that property was sold in November. Somebody else owns Greenway Pet Clinic. We own the property and the house behind Greenway, which is 8644 East Tanque Verde. At this point, I would also like to add that, and I think other people may speak to it as well, it was myself that told all the neighbors in the surrounding area that there was a rezoning consideration meeting that was happening because it was received at our accounting address that this was happening. Everybody else, of course, I sent it out by email. Nobody else had received it. I did not receive a letter at Bandolero Ranch, which is obviously directly west of the proposed property. I did not receive any information at the residence at 8500 East Woodland Road. When we're talking about the rezoning, Bandolero is not comparable to a multifamily development. Bandolero is a natural for SR and rural zoning. They're calling this a residential use, but it's actually multifamily. They call this kind of a development horizontal multifamily. In fact, multifamily zoning is much more than urban zoning. In addition, I would like to add that I'd be interested to see what the hydrology report indicates going now, because the previous meeting, it was going directly towards us. And what I would have to say about that is we were held to the standards of having drainage retentions as well. This past week was an excellent example when you're looking at the stormwater runoff, because as most of you know, Tucson got hit hard by a lot of rain. I can tell you 100% with honesty, the storm water alone filled up our retention basins that we were required to have when we were building. It wasn't runoff. There was many other things that Bandolero was required to do for drainage, and we cannot handle any more runoff. And according to the previous hydrology report and their plan from the last meeting, I do appreciate that they put in additional retention basins, but I cannot stress enough that when the runoff happens, it is going to directly affect 8644 as well as 8526 Bandolero. If you look at the map that Lexi put up, 80% of the surrounding is SR zoned. And they're speaking of 8 units per acre. I would like to speak.
I'll be right back.
I would like to speak about the traffic as well. I can tell you personally, just from this morning, unfortunately, my dog got out. Needless to say, she crossed Tankerverde and spent a lot of time looking for her. That being said, from 8 o'clock till 9 o'clock, the amount of traffic that goes down Tankerverde is absolutely horrendous. Just to get out of the neighborhood, I am not exaggerating when I say I had to wait probably 10 minutes to every single time I needed to turn around, which was, I can't even count on 2 hands. 10 minutes each time to turn around because traffic was so intense. That U-turn that would be directly in front of the fire station, directly across from the Lutheran church. It is crazy busy from 7:30 to 9 o'clock because there's a school over at the Lutheran church and there is tons of people coming from the east to go to work or wherever they're going. Have a big concern about, 47 casitas. And somebody else mentioned that it's not just 47 cars, it's double that or triple that. Have they done traffic studies? I believe at the last meeting, there was no traffic studies yet. The other thing I want to know is, what do we do when it rains? If this gets rezoned and the 47 casitas go in, and then the people that are left that have been there for years, Bandolero has been there for almost 20 years now. What do we do when it affects us? We are a $20 million facility. That's what it cost us to put the facility together. We have millions of dollars worth of high-end horses, which Lexi commented about, that we are a high-end facility. Yes, we are. So what do we do when it affects our livestock? And I would also like to say that, in SR zoning, we have tractors. We use the tractors at different times of the day. We have animals. There are smells. And you're considering allowing a rezoning for individuals to come in to a suburban ranch area. Is that really conducive to what we are? And that's all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers, for participating. The next person is Katrina Trevor.
So there I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I spoke last time and I want to thank you again for letting me speak again. I'm speaking on a little bit different issue this time. My name is Katrina Trevor. My spouse and I live at 8755 East Bears Path Road. We purchased our home about 12 years ago and we've lived on the east side for over 25 years. Our property lies directly across Bears Path Road and we're about 500 feet from the southeast corner of this property. There's 2 points that came out in an article I read, is that zoning generally moves in one direction. This is about Tucson, toward more density. And that's in favor of the, sadly, in favor of the developers and not the homeowners. And also the city is pursuing multiple housing goals, including encouraging increased density and affordable housing in more central and downtown Tucson, not necessarily where we live. And downtown, you have more transit options are easily available, and there's not as much new infrastructure required. So I want to share my screen. I hope I can do this. There's something there. It says basic advanced. So I hit shared screen.
Hey, Mr. Beal, can you make sure that Ms. Trevor can share her screen?
Yes, I'm just doing that right now.
Thank you.
Okay, should I close this?
I think you need to try again, probably.
Okay.
It's like turning it off and turning it on, right?
Okay, so just hit the share screen button, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Do I need, it just says basic and I'm seeing whiteboard, Zoom, but I'm not seeing my screen. Unfortunately, darn it. Maybe if I hit share, nope. What would be the problem that I can't share this? Oh, there we go. Computer, video, PowerPoint as virtual background, share sound. So I'm not seeing it here. Darn it. It's really actually very good for you to see what's going on in our neighborhood. Plugin to acquire SharePoint as virtual background. So I can't share my screen just by hitting share screen?
I don't know.
Yeah, shoot.
Should be able to, because
I know. Let me see what's going on. Yeah, darn it. Okay, well, unfortunately, I won't be able to share this with you. Yeah, I spent a lot of time making some SharePoint, PowerPoint. What I really want to speak to is what's going on with the infill and the densification, and other people have really talked about this, but I had some excellent maps to show you regarding that. What I want to emphasize is that this property does not exist in a vacuum. And I think we've all kind of recognized this, but my slides really showed that currently we have about 750 rental units in our area. That's this area of Bears Path, Bear Canyon Road and Catalina Highway. But what's going to happen here is we're going to have, I'm going to try to hit this one more time and see if it'll show it. Nope. Select the window. No. I was worried about this. Oh, there we go. There we go. Let me see if I can do this now. Here we go. Here we go. So this is really about the rental housing infill that's occurring in our neighborhood. And I hope I can get to the next slide. And here's the slide that I really wanted to show. This is, here we are at Tanque Verde. Here's the new Casita Village here. This is where I live right here. This is where the Feringers live. The Tabors live down here. This is East Bears Path Road. What we're dealing with in our neighborhood is really this densification, and our concerns are about the traffic and the sewers and the overflow and the water usage, flooding, drainage, etc. But this is what's being added directly into our neighborhood. Here's our Safeway, the library, our ACE. And, I can walk from there to there in a relatively short period of time. So this is all very close. So we're talking about a total of 1,327 rental units in this area. We're also in our neighborhood dealing with this 11 acres that is SR that people want to turn into, that they'd like to switch to RX2, which would add 26 lots to our neighborhood. And also, if you go out to Tanque Verde and Houghton, we're talking about adding, here's another Casita Village. We have Casita Village at Catalina Highway. Now we're having Casita Village at La Mariposa. This is about 170 units and could go up to over 200 units here and 37 homes here. So that's what we're looking at. And I have to emphasize, that's all we know about as neighbors and as people who are involved with our community. That's what's been approved or proposed. We don't know about the rest of them. So this is a huge number of rental units coming into our area. And I want to show you oops, let me go back one. This is, again, what I want to emphasize is this is the woodland area that we're talking about. I call it the Woodland Island. Here's Tanque Verde. I didn't emphasize that Catalina Highway and Bear Canyon Road, all this traffic is feeding down into this area. So all the development that's occurring in the east and the northeast of us are all flowing down Tanque Verde to go west. So this is basically what we see as the woodland area that we like to think of it as the Woodland Island. We call this, it's a unique, beautiful, it's a jewel within the city of Tucson. And we encourage everyone to drive down there. I know Mr. Areno has done that. And we got to appreciate the need to preserve this. And this includes a mesquite bosque, all the equine activity, the small livestock, the wildlife corridors, the birds, and the walkability. I walk this virtually every day. All my neighbors see me out here walking down Bears Path onto Woodland and around. As relates to this particular property, which is here, a large portion of this is zoned, as we just discussed, RX and SR. But to attempt to open the property south of Tanque Verde to higher density zoning and rental properties in this case does not maintain the character of our existing neighborhood. And I think, Mr. Areno, you talked about this and emphasized this point in your preliminary report. Yes, there are the Tanque Verde casitas right here, but we should not be using this as an excuse to continue the densification of our area. As we know, this is the classic domino effect. One piece of property goes into more dense rentals, then the rest of the property starts falling. Allowing this development would only further contribute to the densification, the issues of traffic, sewers, flooding that everybody has talked about. We don't believe that that is the goal of Tucson city planners or Plan Tucson's. We are not against development, but we hope that this property could at least be left as SR and developed that way, or RX1 and could be developed that way. We hope you'll respect the concerns of our unique area. And we have to remember, this is not central or downtown Tucson. We're not talking about exactly affordable housing in quotes. And I think all the developers throughout this area that are trying to develop these different rental units have to think about and be accountable to the people in the neighborhoods and try to keep the character of our neighborhoods. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for participating, Ms. Trevor. Susan Wick, Ms. Wick, are you present?
I think I have to take this off, but I'm not sure how.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Ureno.
Yep.
Susan Wick.
Yep.
8649 Woodland Road. I would like to share if I could get permission, please, or
okay,
try.
Mr. Beal, would you please grant permission to Ms. Wick?
Most of the items that, okay.
You're good to go now, Ms. Wick.
Okay. Oh. Sorry, my this is an entertaining, this is entertainment for everybody. I hope it'll at least make everyone smile if it goes through. Let me know if you can see it.
We have it now.
Okay. All right. So I think many of the things that I wanted to comment on have been said, but I just like to make a couple of additional comments. When our neighbor was talking about evacuation, one thing you have to remember is that evacuation has to include our livestock. And that's not a trivial matter when you're talking about $100,000 horses that have to be moved out of here as well. When Lexi was speaking, she was saying that some of the adjacent uses are not SR. And that is correct, but a fire station is a required service. And Bandolero is compatible with all of what you're seeing. My horses and their horses get along just fine. But neighbors who are not used to livestock are not going to get along with my animals just fine. So I think that's something to consider. I don't think you can equate those things. Drainage basins are great as long as they're maintained, but I can tell you that we have many drainage basins around this area that are not maintained. And so something would have to be done to assure us that that's going to happen. Now, one of the biggest concerns I have is that the city has approved and allowed certain construction that's caused a great deal of trouble. And yes, this past rainstorm again demonstrated why we're not so confident in the development of future development of all of this. The rain that came down pushed through woodland, and because of a recent construction near me, it did not allow that drainage to connect with the Farringer Wash. It pushed it across my property, and we had about 3 feet of standing water for a short time. That is totally unacceptable and totally new. It's not something that happens all the time. So we still don't have a remedy for all of that. And yet we're being asked to allow new construction that is also going to cause additional problems. And I mean, it's just inevitable, but there'll be nobody to answer for it. That's the truth. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you very much for participating.
Thank you.
Lovely photos.
They were supposed to make everybody smile, even in this difficult discussion.
They did.
Okay.
So that's the list of folks who emailed in to Planning and Development Services. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak tonight?
Hi, my daughter Ella Tabor would like to, if you have time.
Yes, please go ahead. Ella Tabor?
Ella, I think she's trying to, you know what, I'll read you her letter.
Hi there.
Hello, please, Ella Tabor, please start with your address and then go right ahead.
I live at 8760 East Bears Path Road.
Okay. Please go ahead.
And I wanted to talk regarding my letter, and I just wanted to say I expressed concern with simply just turning out of my street. It's already hard enough as a person that just got my license. It's already hard enough to get onto Cinco Verde, and let alone trailering is another story. Having more homes, I feel like would just create more traffic, and it'd just be even harder to get across the street. I also wanted to address that I love the valley. I love living in the valley, and I really am so thankful to live near Woodland Road, and I don't want to see it get developed, and I'd like to stay in the valley for my whole life, and seeing all these potential developments is kind of saddening to me. I want to continue to live down here.
Thank you very much, Ella, and congratulations on getting your license, and stay safe out there. I see some hands up, so I'll just call on them in the order that they appear on my screen. Laura Harsh.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Laura Harsh. I live at 8951 East Bears Path. I actually have some slides that I'd like to share, if I may.
Sure, Mr. Beal, please enable screen sharing for Ms. Harsh. Okay. You can go now, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, we're there.
Great. So good evening. Thank you actually for giving us the time tonight and all your thoughtful consideration of our presentations. As I said, my name is Laura Harsh. I'm a property owner with my husband at 89 East Bears Path Road. And tonight I'm going to be presenting some information illustrating what we as a community have come together collectively to gain a supermajority in opposition to this rezoning proposal. So what is a supermajority? I'm sure, Mr. Urino, you are very familiar with these because it's coming from Arizona House Bill 2116 and some others within the city of Tucson. But a supermajority, otherwise known as a qualified majority, is a requirement for a proposal to gain a specified level of support that exceeds a simple majority to have effect. An effective tool in legislation is often used to facilitate quality deliberation and more consensual decision-making. The city of Tucson defines a rezoning supermajority as a minimum of 20% of neighbors located within the rezoning area, which is 150 feet from the border of the property in question, and 20% of the parcels directly impacted by the rezoning proposal. On this map here, you can see so we have some calculations of how we are showing that we have the supermajority. So parcel C922-10 in the green outline here is bordered by 8 parcels and the fire station 21. The 8 parcels that are impacted by the proposed rezoning are shown in the hatched marks, as I just pointed out, and they total 21.65 acres. Now, 9.1 acres are within that 150-foot distance that is required to get approval, and it's indicated by the yellow dashed line. And of those borders, we have the 9.1 acres, and of that, within the total acreage, it's 42% opposition rate to this. That is the 20% of neighbors within the 150 feet of the rezoning area. Now, of the parcels directly impacted, 7 out of the 8 parcels are in opposition, which is 87% opposition rate. So given these values provided by the Arizona Code, these calculations easily represent more than the required 20% of either. I also would like to show you just the dots here are community signatories. These are all neighbors around the parcel in question that formally oppose this rezoning proposal. On August 5th of 2022, Mark Eisenberger submitted a formal opposition letter to the city of Tucson containing handwritten signatures from approximately 90 residents in the Woodland neighborhood, which makes up owners of 66 plus properties. I'm sure you've probably seen that. January 19th of 2023, which was just, what, yesterday? What was that? Today? As of today, actually, it's today. 232 petitioners, specifically from the city of Tucson and Pima County residents, signed an electronic petition on change.org opposing the rezoning of that lot. So in summary, a supermajority total percentages required to prevent rezoning are significantly above the 20% rezoning area and the impacted parcels. Petitioners from the Woodland neighborhood, the community of Tanque Verde, and the city of Tucson are solidly united and opposed to the rezoning of 6.1 acres for was 54. We now learn tonight it's fewer than that, but still more than what we were hoping for. Local organizations also in support of rejecting the rezoning are the Tanque Verde Valley Association, the Powderhorn HOA, Bear Canyon Neighborhood Association, and the Castle Rock HOA. So I thank you for your time and allowing me to share that with you this evening.
Thank you for your participation, Ms. Harsh.
Thank you.
The next person with their hand up is Steve Kozachik. Mr. Kozachik.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Steve Kozachik, I'm the Ward 6 council member. Ward 6 is Midtown. Realize I don't live out in Tanque Verde area, but I'm out there quite frequently and know several of the residents who live out there. And very articulate presentations, I must say. Mr. Reno, I'm going to just speak in kind of high level comments. I don't live out there. I'm not going to speak directly to traffic counts and supermajorities and all of that. But my point is that your first decision was correct, and nobody has offered any valid reason here tonight for you to reverse it. None of the development that the Planning Center identified in their presentation just popped up since your first decision and tonight. And so it was all there to begin with. And so nothing that they showed was really new, other than a reduction in by 7 units and shifting some of the development to in one direction. It is a very unique riparian area. You've said you've been out there 3 times recently. If you have, then you've seen the lay of the land out there. It is a riparian area that has mesquite busks and lots of different wildlife that you've seen in some of the presentations as well. It is a scenic corridor. You're also aware of some of the challenges that we are having with respect to development along both our gateway and scenic corridors. You ruled on the Tucson Electric Power rezoning request from Banner UMC. That conversation is still going on. And we have taken the position at the council that the conditions in place with respect to development along both gateway and scenic corridors are there for a reason. And we drew a line in the sand with TEP and said that we are not going to vitiate the integrity of those ordinances, and that we're now in a completely different conversation with that utility. So I would suggest that the Tanque Verde scenic corridor deserves the same sort of consideration. Several people have mentioned the hydrology concerns. The presentation by Planning Center said that they haven't done a full analysis. There's no way in good conscience that I believe you can approve this rezoning without having the full analysis having already been done by Planning Center. In the alternative, I have seen several of the videos and the still photographs, and I think Mr. Cunningham was trying to share some of the videos showing just from the most recent rains the extreme sheet flow that is exhibited in that area. Other people have mentioned flooding. I think it was of the Bandolero Farm area, and so ranch area. And so there are several issues with respect to hydrology that have yet to be addressed. Several of the speakers also mentioned the densification. It does not fit, as you correctly pointed out in your first presentation, either the area plan or Plan Tucson. If the developers want to amend either of those plans, there's a process for that. And in fact, the city is right now engaging in a very formal and public process for amending Plan Tucson, which is required by statute. But you don't do that through a rezoning process and then hope for the best. So that hasn't been addressed either. Several of the residents also mentioned the traffic. The area is virtually landlocked, and one speaker used that term. As you mentioned, you were out there recently. You have seen it for yourself. Added traffic to replace adding traffic simply with no place to go creates significant backups. It's a safety concern, not only from the standpoint of the added traffic, but also from the standpoint of being able to evacuate the area, as one of the other speakers already mentioned. And finally, I would say this, we have a native plant preservation ordinance that's in place. The area is surrounded by bosques and several native plants. Any development plan is going to have to comply with our NPPO. And I know that Lexi in her presentation referred to several of the landscape species is just fallen down and not, the intimation is not worth preserving. In fact, our NPPO requires either preservation and or replacement with multipliers. So that hasn't been addressed, and it won't be addressed until there's a development plan in place. And that's problematic too. So it's simply wrong for the area. At the very, very least, after I saw the reduction in residential units from 54 to 47, I was going to say, why don't you just continue this and let the residents and the planning center meet together and try and hash this out? But frankly, I think you've got right now to sustain your first denial. It doesn't fit the area plan, doesn't fit the general plan, and for all of the other reasons that I and other speakers have already mentioned, I think it should simply sustain the original denial. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kozachik. Mr. Latour, Vaughn Latour.
Good evening, Mr. Urino, and thank you for letting me speak. My name is Vaughn Latour. I'm the president of the Bear Canyon Neighborhood Association and the vice president of the Powderhorn Ranch HOA. I'm speaking to you this evening in regards to your reconsideration for C9-2210, the proposed Casita Village at Tenca Verde, who is requesting a zoning change from SR to R2 after you correctly denied their application earlier. Allowing such a dramatic change will alter the Bear Canyon neighborhood and the Tenca Verde Valley irreparably. In 1984, the mayor and council approved and adopted the BCNP. The plan set up for zoning in the area for residents with a mix of zoning classifications from suburban ranch to higher density areas. The plan allowed for the flavor of the neighborhood, which is what makes it so attractive today. The plan that the city and neighborhoods developed received national notoriety as well thought, well planned, with a look to future proper development. The plan set forth as a zoning guide for future years, setting up specific areas for commercial, high density, medium density, and low density. These certain areas that the neighborhood plan set up included areas for riparian habitat, flood areas that should not be developed, and certain areas zoned SR in order to afford a mini ranch type community, and also certain areas that were R1, 2, and 3 development compatible. The BCNP is now under attack from developers looking to maximize profits by rezoning at the expense of existing neighborhoods. The developers claim that building single-family owner-occupied dwellings on SR is no longer profitable, and that flies in the face of the thousands of small Arizona contractors who are making a very good living doing just that. Homeowners that bought and built over the last 39 years that abided by the rules did so with the assurances that the existing zoning classifications from the city amounted to a contract in writing as to future development. The BCNP that the city designed and adopted and agreed to follow was intended to perform only two functions, namely to act as a guideline for assigning original city zoning classifications and to guide for future development within the area. Quoting from the introduction of the plan on page 2, the plan states the plan area is presently characterized by low density suburban residential development typical of Pima County's zoning classification of suburban ranch and C1. Later in the plan on page 6 under residential uses goal, the plan states the number 1 is to protect and stabilize the character of the neighborhood and encourage an environment compatible for family living, with a sub-goal of number 2, encourage new quality design residential development, which is compatible with existing neighborhoods. The C9-2210 proposal violates all of these. It is not compatible with the existing and surrounding neighborhoods, and it wants to change plan zoning classifications to a high density development smack in the middle of a designated SR area. Furthermore, you were correct to deny the original request because the plan already set the designated classification for the area at SR. The BCNP further states its policy on page 6, it's to preserve the integrity of established neighborhoods. C9-2210 does not. Number 2, to promote high quality residential infill of vacant lands where adequate streets and utilities are available. C9-22 does not. Water and sewage supply is extremely limited, and there is no viable flood water management plan and it prohibits the recharging of the aquifer by virtually paving over the entire project. Number 3, ensure compatibility of new development with existing land uses. C9-2210 does not. It requires extreme non-conforming zoning and land use change. Number 4, it encouraged a mix of housing types, emphasizing single-family owner-occupied dwellings. C9-2210 does not. These are not a mix. They are cookie cutter design and not owner occupied. Under implementation, your original denial was also correct because BNCP discourages additional traffic into developed areas and C9-2210 does not. And number 5, it allows translation of proposed residential units into any appropriate zoning classification, provided that the total number of units on a specific parcel shall not exceed the proposed density for the specific parcel as shown on the general development plan. C9-2210 violates this as well. In closing, I want to commend you and your original rezoning denial and respectfully ask that you once again deny this rezoning efforts as not compatible with the Bear Canyon neighborhood plan that the city agreed to and has followed for the past 39 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Latour. Mr. Korf, Mr. Aaron Korf.
Hello, my name is Aaron Korf. I live at 8951 East Bears Path Road, and I oppose the measure to rezone the proposed development Casita Village for several reasons. The preliminary rezoning report issued by Mr. Areno on December 22nd, 2022 rejected the rezoning proposal, citing the Casita Village's incompatibility with the development guidelines set forth in Plan Tucson. To date, the developer hasn't offered any reason to reverse Mr. Areno's original rejection. The zoning examiner should be aware that this sets powerful precedent that should be applied to this and other proposed developments in the area. To quote Mr. Areno's conclusion in the original finding, quote, "The proposed rezoning is not consistent with the policy direction provided in Plan Tucson. The property is surrounded almost exclusively by neighborhoods with existing low-density residential SR or RX1 zoned homes. Under Plan Tucson, the policy goal for development within an existing neighborhood is to maintain the character of the existing neighborhood, to promote environmentally sensitive design that protects the integrity of existing neighborhoods, complements adjacent land uses, and enhances the overall function and visual quality of the street, adjacent properties, and the community. In conclusion, the proposed development does not meet these policy goals. The requested R2 zoning should not be approved," unquote. Further toward this, while the developers slightly reduced the scope of the project at Casita Village, these measures don't reduce the impact on the area. There's no meaningful reduction in hardscaping of the site, no attempt to address flood control for neighboring properties, and no acknowledgement of the increased traffic risks highlighted by others tonight. These put the development squarely at odds with Plan Tucson's development goals, and as such, rezoning for Casita Village should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Korf. Mr. Delegati.
Thank you, Mr. Areno. I'm a second generation at 8725 East Bears Path Road. My parents built this home. I've watched this east side change over the last 50 years, and I'm not going to rehash what everybody's objections are. I'm just going to parrot them and say, along with everybody else, that I object to the project based on the impact of traffic, flooding, et cetera, and I'd like to thank the commissioner for an opportunity to raise those objections. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delegati. I have a hand up from Ann Hollis.
It's actually your husband. Ann is my wife. I'm Steve Smith, and my wife and I, we live at 8900 East Bears Path. And a slightly different tack, because I agree with everybody's objections, but we've lived here pushing 30 years, and I'm going to throw micro pebbles at, Mr. Areno and some of the Tucson folks are listening in. I'm sure you're very wonderful, nice people, but starting even as Mr. Latour stated, almost a handshake agreement when we're annexed, that we received all sorts of assurances, and just like that gate issue at the Farringer Wash. We get all sorts of assurances, and nothing happens. And a big bugaboo about me is we do live in the scenic corridor. And for year after year after year after year, I take picture after picture of all the A-frames, banners, all the businesses putting out. It looks like Mardi Gras. I send them all to the Tucson sign office. I never hear jack. I send them even to the appropriate council person. I never hear jack. So my comments here I made, like, don't think maybe pardon our bit of our cynicism, our skepticism, when we hear all these assurances that we'll be sure and take care of that. Pardon our cynicism. We're nice people, but pardon my skepticism on assurances. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Rogers, I see your hand up. I know we heard from you, but go right ahead if you have something more to say.
Thank you for allowing me to say one more thing.
Sure.
You know, no, I'm guessing that you saw pictures of the recent rains that we've had in the last week.
Yes.
The Castle Lakes, it was built in the early 80s, 90s, through the 90s. And, one of the things that I think is really important to say is they have the lake there. And when we have rain, like we did this past week, that lake that they have, it overflows. And what does it do? It overflows onto Woodland Road. And it did this week. And I mentioned at the last meeting that, I've been here long enough to tell you that it's gotten, so bad that they've shut the entire road down and they've actually asked us to evacuate. 4 to 5 foot of water coming across. It's just an example of there is no place else for the water to go. In this past week, again, that lake at the Castle Lakes, it overflowed again. It started coming down to Woodland. It goes into the Feringer Wash. It affects all of us. The Tanque Verde Wash behind the 8500, my house, 8350, my additional property, it was flowing again. I have beachfront property out there. We have done the hydrology reports. We know what it's there, as well as the traffic reports. We had to do all of this for Bandolero. I agree with Mr. Kasaki when he says, why don't we get to see this stuff now? We should be able to see this. We're asking to rezone something that we don't actually get to see how it's affecting all of us. Thank you for hearing me. Again.
Thank you. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard?
I would.
Start with your name and address, please.
My name is Greg Thompson. I live at 8710 East Bears Path Road. I think I can speak for all of my neighbors that we would have liked to have had an opportunity to review this revised development plan prior to this meeting. I also just want to mention, I'm a little disappointed that the developer hasn't reached out to any of us in this neighborhood to get any of our thoughts or inputs on this development. Tanque Verde began as a small community, remote from the city, and was settled by ranchers back in the mid-1800s. Today, most of Tanque Verde is still home to large acre plots where we have a strong equestrian presence. While the city has increased its population significantly over the years, Tanque Verde has grown at a much slower rate. It is no secret that much of the land in Tanque Verde is in covenants, which are meant to dictate its land use policies and were put into place to control growth and to ensure land preservation. This proposed development sits on native land that has an abundance of mature trees. If transplanted, most of those trees will not survive due to their extensive root structure. This would be a massive loss for our community and for the animals that inhabit this environment. Per Pima County's website, by protecting and preserving riparian land, we ensure the long-term stability of natural floodplains which allows for the survival of plants and animals indigenous to Pima County. The county's website further states that riparian habitats provide numerous economic benefits, as well as increased groundwater recharge, improve water quality, reduce public expenditures on flood control projects and protection of infrastructure, reduce risk of flooding and erosion, and biological diversity. If this development is allowed to be built, the city would be knowingly and intentionally causing harm to our water supply, the native plants and animals. Our water supply is already in grave danger, and the wildlife in this area relies heavily on the vegetation. If our goal is to protect native riparian land because it is so precious, then we should honor that goal by keeping this land unimproved. Mayor Romero has committed to planting 1 million trees in our city. In April 2022, Nicole Gillette commented about the urban forestry program and stated that the city is looking at every opportunity to maintain our mature tree canopy while we continue to plant additional trees. Ms. Gillette stated that her position covers the entire city, including rural areas, and has said, trees are actually one of our only pieces of infrastructure that grow in value over time. This serves to prove the importance of protecting as many mature trees as possible, but especially those within prime riparian habitat. I am saddened that this project has progressed this far and that the city or mayor and council would approve of a development that appears to negate Mayor Romero's tree initiative and that of the city's urban forestry program. I urge you to reconsider this development. Tanque Verde is a community built for a way of life that doesn't coincide with the type of development that is being proposed. If we continue to overbuild these areas we are meant to preserve, then we are dooming ourselves and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Would anyone else in the audience like to be heard?
This is Heidi Schul. I'd like to make an additional comment if I could.
Please go ahead.
This is to address Suzanne Rogers' comment regarding the Castle Rock Lake. I live in that community and I was out taking pictures most of that day. The issue is really much larger than rain overfilling that lake. We actually keep it low during the winter and before monsoon season and anticipated rains. The morning of that flood, a wave of water was reported coming through Agua Caliente Wash a short time before it came through our property and then ran out onto Woodland, and it was reported to breach the banks and again reported as a wall of water. So that water came through Bonanza Wash, flooded an area that was previously dry, and water came up from Tanque Verde Creek on the Isabella Lee Nature Preserve. There's a kind of a wash that comes in, and that came into the lake, and the lake kind of filled up and just then didn't even serve as a lake. It was part of a waterway. The water continued to flow for most of the day into that lake, and it, then went out of the lake and flowed into a trench and onto Woodland Road. So that's part of the upstream flow that is that so many people have talked about regarding the flooding issues. Just wanted to kind of clarify that more development upstream is going to add to that issue.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard? Ms. Willett, would you like to be heard?
Yes, Mr. Urino, thank you again for the opportunity. Couple things to address. I think it's going to be a tag team effort. So I'll handle the stuff that I can address, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bill, and then the property owner, Phil Amos, would also like a chance to address the everyone in attendance. So first things, I'm going to hit on the traffic side of things. But before I do that, I want to highlight some things. It was alluded to that our site plan is not appropriately planned, or that it's cartoonish or what have you. I I want to assure you that this is a professional business that we all do, working highly with civil engineers, and the site planning efforts that are presented are scaled appropriately. Those PALs are in fact 24 feet wide as required by the city's requirements for access drives and multifamily developments, as well our setbacks, everything of the like there. So just wanted to address that there, that we do take our job very serious, as you know, Mr. Urino, as consultants in the industry, and our site plans are accurately designed, albeit, and this is a very preliminary phase in the development process, as you know, that the rezoning often starts with this notion of gaining certainty before going through doing extensive hydrology and further traffic analysis. So at the rezoning phase, as you are aware, Mr. Urino, it often requires a preliminary analysis of the drainage and hydrology, which we have done here. It requires a preliminary analysis of traffic, which we have done here. All of which is reviewed by the city and confirmed and reviewed upon for this process, and will further be analyzed as we move through the next phases of development, should this be approved. So by no means is this intended to be the perfect effort, but it is an effort to start the dialogue here and gaining that certainty for the property owner to move into the next step, which is very costly, etc. So
hey Lexi, my phone was updating. All of a sudden it just started updating and I wanted to speak. I didn't have a chance, the phone died. So
yeah, so I was gonna run through a couple things and then I'll turn it back over to you if that's all right.
That would be great.
Okay, perfect. But yes, all of these things will be analyzed. So we've done a preliminary analysis to ensure that the proposed development does not impact the adjacent property owners, and there's rules and regulations put into place. We're acknowledging those rules and agree that we will be developing in compliance with all appropriate codes, floodplain ordinances. Traffic will be further analyzed at the time of development, etc. This is not the final pass, the end all be all, if you will, from that side of things. And Bill can speak more to that. But in terms of discussing, there was a comment that was made that we haven't done anything in this approach moving forward, and that's not true. We've reduced our number of units. We've significantly reduced the disturbance in the floodplain. In fact, we're entirely avoiding the Farringer Wash, which I'm hearing is the wash of concern here, and we are in the floodway there of the Tanque Verde Creek and minimally encroaching in that. Again, Bill will speak to those things at a higher level. But I wanted to touch on the traffic. We are reducing the overall trips that are generated by reducing the number of units here. Those trips will be evenly dispersed throughout the day. And again, if traffic at the time of development, so when we go to do all our grading plans at that time, we'll have to reanalyze traffic, and it will analyze traffic at that time, accounting for all of the accumulative development going in the area. And at that time, if it is warranted by the Department of Transportation for the city that improvements are necessary to ensure a safe travel experience for everyone in the area, then the developer will be on the hook of funding and constructing said improvements. Those improvements may include or could include, I don't know what those would include at this day, but they could include a pork chop at our driveway, forcing all traffic movements to go right. So the option of jetting across Tanque Verde Road into the turn lane lined up with the Lutheran Church would not be possible because it's too close there, and a pork chop would inevitably force everyone to make turns. Additional signage suggesting no U-turns are allowed from our residents would also help that. Other suggestions that the Department of Transportation may come up with is closure of medians. So if it's such a problem that it's unsafe, they could recommend a closure of the access point at, or that median break at both in line with the church as well as at Bear Canyon Road, forcing some of these indirect left turns that we see all across town and is very typical for development in Tucson along major arterials, and have proven to show an adequate solution for some traffic here in the interim of you know, what we decide here as a community. So to suggest that, you know, the traffic is going to be a big problem and we're not addressing that is a little bit unfair, because it will be further analyzed beyond what we have done. And currently our traffic engineer, in which the Department of Transportation has agreed with, have suggested that the capacity on Tankerverde Road is sufficient to support the 47 units that are now being proposed here. The other item I wanted to talk about was, it was mentioned that the city has native plant preservation ordinances that require inventory of any type of plant species, regardless of the health of that. And I recognize that as a landscape architecture firm here, we're very intimately familiar with the native plant preservation ordinance and what it entails. So that will be met, and all code requirements will be met, mitigated for as intended by that code there. There was another comment, and I know, Mr. Urino, you're probably really familiar with the notion of coming to the nuisance there. And that's something that as property owners move to an area, they don't have a legal standing, if you will, to suggest that the neighbors that exist before them moving to it are a problem. So I recognize, and it's a valid concern, but what you can offer there is that our property owner and ultimately the manager can include disclosure statements to make it very clear, so that any of the folks moving into this area are acknowledging that they're moving into adjacent to some ranch properties, and that there may be some smells associated with that, and that happens regularly in the development industry. So the next item just that I wanted to hit on lastly and reiterate, because we did it really clearly in the previous presentation and didn't touch on it as much, but I wanted to reiterate that this plan is outside of the Bear Canyon Neighborhood Plan entirely, and therefore we're not subject to the policies, the regulations suggested in that. That being said, we've designed everything in compliance with that plan, and that we've limited we've restricted entirely any access into the neighborhoods. We've limited the single-story height. We're committed to using materials that are similar and consistent with the surrounding area. And we don't need a plan amendment to do these things because we're not in the plan. So all of these things are valid. And further, staff has, and again, this is open to interpretation as evidenced why we're here tonight, but staff has also found we are in compliance with Plan Tucson and the policy direction in that. So I'll stop there and I'll turn it over to Bill to add some things there. And then we'll hear from Phil Amos, the property owner and developer, future operator, and then I'll come back on. So Bill, can you address some things there?
Yes, thank you, Lexi, and I will be brief. There were two issues that I wanted to touch on. One was some concerns that were spoken of in relation to sewer in the area, and the other was very significant comments relative to drainage in the area. The sewer comments tended to be on two things. One is that there are sewer capacity issues, that they've had sewage backed up into homes, and there was also a comment about extending sewer lines into floodplains. First of all, we are not extending a sewer line into floodplains. We are just tying into an existing sewer line that's just south of the property. And as far as capacity, the owner of this property has already agreed to do an augmentation of the Woodland Road sewer line to solve the sewer capacity issues that the people upstream of us have been having. They're going to be installing a 12-inch sewer line that will completely cut off a large section of the upstream sewage and take it entirely out of these areas that have been backed up just east of our property. So not only do we recognize that there's a capacity issue, we will have adequate capacity to be able to connect this property, but we're also solving the problem for the upstream property owners. As far as flood impacts to neighboring properties, there were a number of issues. I thought it was interesting that one of the speakers talked about how locally, nationally, zoning trends are always toward more density. I can say from the engineering side, flood control design parameters are always in the direction of more strict. And while we have been doing retention detention design since the 80s, the techniques, the design standards have continued to increase and become more strict. And the performance of the basins that are currently being designed are better than the basins that were designed years ago. A number of comments really raised on the drainage. Some were comments related to the Tanque Verde Creek, some were to the Farringer Wash, some were to the significant drainage issues just upstream of our property. For the most part, we can't solve those problems, nor should we be asked to solve those problems. If we're going to be allowed to do a development, what we should be asked for, and what the city absolutely demands of the owners, is that if we're going to develop our property, we absolutely have to make sure that we are not creating any new problems. I understand that the Bandolero Ranch is immediately downstream, and drainage that comes off of this property today flows into the Bandolero Ranch, and drainage that comes into this property after the development is completed will continue to run into the Bandolero Ranch property. However, drainage design in the city of Tucson forces us to design detention and retention systems such that the amount of water leaving our property in a post-development condition does not exceed the amount of water running off the property in the pre-development existing. So while we understand that there are issues upstream and downstream, we can't solve upstream issues, but we can darn sure make sure that we're not going to be creating any problems for the people downstream, and make sure that the flow leaving our property does not create any issues. There was one person that was in the upstream area that was concerned about the fact that we would be raising some of our lots, some of the home sites above the Tanque Verde Creek watershed elevation. And that could create a backup flow into theirs. That's not going to be the case. The area that has been aligned along the eastern property line will allow a drainage way to be constructed, with the upstream side of that drainage way being at the natural grade of the property line. So any water that's flowing out of those properties to the east will drop into that drainage way and will be routed through our property into detention basins, and eventually to be able to be released from the property. That we will not be, nor would the city allow us to, raising our property in such a manner that it could create any upstream impacts. So yeah, we will not be discharging any more water into the Farringer. We will not be discharging any more water into the Tanque Verde Creek. And then my last comment was that someone had indicated that I had spoken to the fact that we have not done a full analysis that was specifically related to the design of detention basins. We have done a detailed analysis on offsite drainage, how much water is coming based on current development and potential future development patterns upstream of the property. We have done a detailed analysis of how much drainage is currently generated on our property in an existing condition, and as well as how much drainage will be developed on our property in a post-development condition. And so we know exactly how much water we need to be able to accept into our property to make sure that nobody upstream is being damaged. And we know how much water we are going to have to capture on our property and hold back so that no one downstream of our property is going to be damaged. And so consequently, it is not that we have not done a full analysis. What we haven't decided yet is exactly how the drainage will be routed through the property, which basin it will be taken to, what the exact size of each basin will be taken to. But we have done a full analysis in terms of how much water comes in, how much water will leave, and how much we generate. And that's all I really have.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill, for adding that there. Phil, the floor is yours.
Okay, I've listened to the discussion. This is the second, and I didn't speak at the last meeting. First, I would like to say I've owned that property since 2009. So I've watched for the last 12, 13 years, see development all the way around me change. And that includes a lot of the people that spoke tonight. Things have changed around that area. And I'm watching what happens, and now we go forward with a rezone, which we would not have gone forward with. We worked closely with the city of Tucson to address the drainage, to address the sewer, to address the traffic, to address the conformity with all the plans. You know, we're not in Bear Canyon. All of these things, and staff recommended approval of our development. And if they had said no anywhere along the way, I would have stopped. They said, no, this is in keeping with the plan, and this is a reasonable use for that property. And so we followed the recommendation. We've done everything, and now we've even scaled back. None of our development, except for maybe 2 units, now goes into the wash. And as Bill just eloquently described, any of the runoff that's coming in other people's property is not caused by us. It's caused by stuff upstream we cannot fix. What we are creating by the city standards, we're not allowed to create any runoff into any other property. And now we're not even building anywhere close except for those 2 units. We pulled everything up toward Tanque Verde. If not this development, what you're really saying, if you deny this project, is no, this needs to be SR. And I concur with Lexi's analysis. Yeah, there's SR property. That is a commercial operation for the equine center. I don't know how many, trucks and cars and trailers and horses are going in there every single day. And the same thing is true all along that street. If it's not going to be, it's this, what is it going to be? Because nobody in their right mind, when you got 30,000 cars going up and down the road, are going to say, yeah, I want to build a ranch house on 6 acres. It's what you're really saying is don't build anything here. Don't build anything. So when you say, I just wanted to keep it SR, what you're really saying is, I don't want anything here. And this is not an intrusive use. This is single story. They're not homeowners, but they're renters. And it's a use and a need that's very, very, very needed in this city. I mean, anybody who has children, they can't afford to live in the city. They have to leave because it's too damn expensive. Great if you have a house, but you want to build a new house, nowhere to go. And so it's not like I came up with this plan willy-nilly. I worked with the city for over 2 years. I've owned this property. I've watched everything around us get developed. And now, because I've waited, I've worked with the city, it's like, you can't do anything. So I feel, in a sense, the equitable situation is not being met. In addition, I'm solving, a problem with sewer. That line being increased is going to solve all the sewer problems for that region. It is undersized and it's going away. And that's really all I have to say. I feel like this is a reasonable development request. We followed everything that city told us to do. They've recommended it, but people around, and there's a lot of discussion here, but most of it's baseless. The traffic, the drainage, the sewer, not being in keeping. Everything around it's changed over the last 13, 14 years. And that's what I wanted to say. And I respectfully submit that to the examiner and say, when you consider your decision, please consider that. I've watched for 13 years why everything around me has changed. And I've done everything the city has asked me to do. Now I'm being told, the neighbors don't want it. So that was what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Phil, for adding that there. And I think the last thing that I want to add to this is sorry. I lost my train of thought there. So we'll just, are there any, Mr. Urino, do you have any other questions for us or?
I just have 2 comments, Lexi.
Okay.
The first comment is that in my only 4.5 years in this role, I have never seen anything but top-rate professional quality work from the Planning Center, from Mr. Carroll, who is a frequent contributor on the hydrology side, and from your professional group at the Planning Center. You guys do a very fine job. It doesn't mean that I always agree, as you know, with what you propose, but I just didn't want it to be left unsaid for the assembled group that I think is important. We live in a very wonderful but small community. Even if Tucson hits 1 million people, it's still a small town in my book. And I have to say, I'm proud to have professionals like you and Mr. Carroll present the best you can for your clients. The second thing I would like to say to your client is the decisions that I come to and that later on, it's not my job, I just make recommendations, right? Later on, the mayor and council come to are not based on what the neighbors want. There are standards that I have to apply. I do my best to apply them equitably, and that's what I'd like to say. So if you have nothing else, Ms. Willett, I'm closing the public hearing, and you will have my decision in the normal period of time. Everyone, good night. I want to thank everyone for participating, and I hope you all have a very safe evening, with a second special call out to Ella, the brand new driver. Good night.
Thank you.